During the past election cycle, the media, press, and journalists were under fire for their coverage of the 2016 presidential election, and they still are facing hardships after the election cycle. President Donald Trump has personally declared a war with the media, deeming them unfair and fake news. Throughout this video, we will explore the freedom of the press, with the main question looking at how the new administration has infringed on the First Amendment rights of journalists and other government organizations. As a journalism student, this is a topic that is of great importance to me and my future career. It is worth noting, however, that this video aims to show you, the viewer, how the press and media are a vital institution in American politics and the American democracy, and is in no way attempting to change your views. This is an informative piece, backed by facts, and concludes with my thoughts as to the direction the press is heading because of these actions. So what do we know already? We know that the new administration has ridiculed journalists for their coverage. In an article titled, "Is There a Business Model for Real Journalism?" Kyle Pope shows readers the crisis that journalists face when covering the president and the federal government. Pope writes that President Trump has, quote, "a bully's nose for the vulnerable and defenseless," end quote. The media is always visible and, as such, is a big target for attacks. These attacks by President Trump and his administration have led to record lows in approval ratings for journalists and distrust by the public. But Pope also points out that with Trump's attempt to blend the media and journalists together and take them down, his attacks have, according to Pope, brought journalists closer together in the fight to protect the First Amendment. On that note, let's take a closer look at the First Amendment. It states that, quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances," end quote. President Trump has routinely called out media outlets for what he claims to be false information and libelous claims. He has made derogatory statements towards journalists and their news coverage for stories that show unpopular views of Trump. All of his statements are covered under the First Amendment right to free speech, but how he is going about this war with the media may actually be infringing on the freedom of the press. Let's take a look at this clip from CNN that details this more.
To another of Trump's favorite punching bags, of course, the media, because this week the New York Times wrote one of these substantive stories we're hungry for. The title here is "Donald Trump in New York, Deep Roots but Little Influence." Now, I don't know this for sure, but what do you think? Do you think Trump attacked the New York Times as a result? And take a look at what he said.
The New York Times, it's going out of business. It's the worst newspaper. It is a dead newspaper. These people are incompetent, and they're bad people. They have a bad agenda. We're going to open up the libel laws so when they write falsely, we can sue the media and we can get the story corrected and get damages. Right? Believe me.
Yeah, the New York Times has seen better days, but it's not dead. Jim, I want you to tell us about this libel law issue. Educate our viewers for a moment. Is it fundamentally an attack on press freedom to do what Trump is proposing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you go back to the Supreme Court case, famous case Sullivan, you've got to show malicious intent in proving libel against a media outlet, even when it publishes erroneous facts. The irony here of a guy who's trying to weaken those libel laws, at the same time, he's very much profiting, is he not, from the protections of the First Amendment by basically saying what the heck he wants. But I think in the process, by railing every time he feels he's been done some injustice by the press, I think he is inadvertently making a very, very good case for why you should make the laws stronger, not weaker.
As we have seen in this video clip, Trump said that the New York Times is going out of business and is, quote, "the worst newspaper." It is worth noting, then, that Trump said in an interview with the Times that, quote, "the Times is a great, great American jewel," end quote. As the CNN clip noted, Trump is profiting off the First Amendment whether he realizes it or not. These differing statements and opinions make it difficult for the public to know Trump's stance with the media. Another area of current research that should be discussed is the part of the clip we just saw. Trump said that the New York Times reporters were, quote, incompetent and bad people, end quote. He is also on record at the CIA headquarters saying that journalists are, quote, among the most dishonest human beings on earth, end quote. Journalists have lost trust and faith with the current administration. Nick Dawes, author of the article How the Press Should Cover Trump, says that the only way to combat this is to return to the basic principles of journalism and reporting, those of fairness, accuracy, rigor, and putting pressure on those in power. Dawes also says that while it will be uncomfortable, these changes are necessary to create change. Let's look at one final area of Donald Trump's presidency to date: fake news. The term has become popular since Trump's presidential campaign. Fake news, as defined by PolitiFact, is, quote, made up stuff masterfully manipulated to look like credible journalistic reports that are easily spread online to large audiences willing to believe the fictions and spread the word, end quote. As political commentators and journalists have described, however, Trump's definition is a little different. The Washington Post wrote that Trump redefined fake news as any reporting that he didn't like. He said in a tweet that, quote, any negative polls are fake news. With this background knowledge and research having been explained, I would now like to share my views from a journalist's perspective based solely on my research and prior knowledge. Journalists make up the fourth estate. They are the watchdog of the government and provide the people with updates on government happenings. What President Trump is doing to suppress the media attention on less popular actions is in fact infringing on the right to free press, as well as free speech. We live in a country where, within reason, anyone can speak out against the government, and President Trump has done this himself. But now, since he is in power, it seems that all he wants is nothing bad to be said about him. Yes, the media is an easy target. The media is everywhere. But the media is also doing their job, reporting the facts as they are told to the journalist reporting. The issues of alternative facts raise questions of the current administration's truthfulness. Is what is being said on record the full truth? If not, journalists are not to blame. The source is to blame. Good journalists fact-check each quote before publication. But when Trump has said, again on record, differing opinions of the media, it makes it very difficult to fact-check. When the White House handpicked the attendees for Press Secretary Sean Spicer's press briefings, take a listen to this short clip of the questions he was asked.
Are CNN and the New York Times not in here right now because you're unhappy with their reporting? And why are they not in here?
Because we had a pool and then we expanded it. We added some folks to come cover it.
But there's enough room for others.
It was my decision to decide, to expand the pool.
Sean, the president said today at CPAC, we're going to do something about it in reference to these stories that he is saying are false by the New York Times and CNN and others. What is he talking about there? When
I think we're going to aggressively push back. We're just not going to sit back and let, false narratives, false stories, inaccurate facts get out there.
Among the other organizations banned from briefings were Politico, BuzzFeed, the Daily Mail, BBC, the Los Angeles Times, and New York Daily Mail. How is this constitutional? We have a right to free press. Keyword free. Handpicking who can come to press briefings is not free press, and is a very prominent example of the infringement on First Amendment rights on journalists by the federal government and the new administration. So given this, we can, without a doubt, say that the right to free press has been infringed upon by the new administration. But this battle is far from over. Journalists and the public alike must fight for the truth. After all, the public has a right to know. If Trump continues to cover up the negatives in his administration, the public's right to know will continue to be infringed. Trump has said that journalists are, quote, the enemy of the American people, end quote. Well, Mr. Trump, maybe you would see journalists a little differently if you told the truth. Journalists are not the enemy of the people. Distrust and dishonesty are the real enemies. Infringing on the First Amendment leads down the path of dictatorship. If we want to continue our democracy as we know it to be today, the free press, with the ability to report on all sides, positive or negative, is a vital piece of that. Thank you.